I left the best for the last. This passage is about a whimsical land and a Mad Hatter and a white rabbit. And the reason that I chose these characters for this passage is to bring home the point that, for the most part, ACT science is not about the science. Really, it's about reading tables, understanding graphs, looking at trends, and being able to interpret values and results of an experiment. This passage was actually inspired by a real recent practice test where the scientists were studying squirrels. So let's quickly look at the first sentence or two of this passage, and we see, okay, we're studying the dietary preferences of the March hares. And then please don't worry about reading the rest of the text. You could quickly look at the tables, but then really jump to the first question. Now, this question is asking us about the overarching goal of this experiment. So let's look at our choices. Choice A is very limited in that it's saying that the scientists, or I'm sorry, the White Rabbit and the Mad Hatter were interested in the effect of sunshine, which is not what the design is about. This experiment is more than just sunshine. And choice B, this one is actually talking about the dietary preferences, whether the March hares reject unripe or overripe berries. So that's most likely the correct answer. But since we're going over the test together, we can quickly look at choices C and D. So choice C is about percent berries that were cached. Now, there's more than just, the study involves more than just percent berries that were cached. So again, choice C is also a very limited overarching goal. And choice D is about the distance between sunrise and sunset. And if you look at the tables, nowhere do we talk about distance of sunrise versus sunset. So really the choice would be choice B. Question 28 is a very good question to solve via the three W's. So let's find the where. The where is table 2. The who would be the eating of the ripe red berries. And the why is because we're looking to find the distance that they traveled. So eating of the ripe red berries. So let's look at table 2. And we see that there are two columns. One of them is regarding the values. One of them is eating. One of them is caching. So please look at the correct column. And it was red ripe. So it would be the first row here. So it's 20.3. And if you look at your choices, that would be choice J. Now, please pay attention. There was a trap choice, choice G, which is 10.8. And that is the caching of the red ripe berries. So please, when you're locating your where and your who, remember to look at the correct cell of a table. Question 29 has a lot of bookkeeping, so it's best to make sure that you're looking at the correct where, who, and the why. And it's a type of question that you would need to look at the answer choices, go through them, and pick the one that's correct. So let's start by choice A. Choice A is saying ripe blueberries were eaten more frequently than overripe blueberries. So let's find the correct row and column. So we're looking for ripe blueberries and eaten, so that's 40. And also the overripe blueberries that were eaten, so 40 versus 80. So ripe blueberries was 40, and let's jot down the values. Overripe blueberries were eaten as with an 80%. And well, 40 is less than 80, so choice A is incorrect. Now let's look at choice B. For choice B, we're looking at overripe blueberries and the rejection percentage versus ripe blueberries. So rejection of overripe versus ripe. Let's go to the table. Overripe rejection. So rejection is column 3. Overripe was 10, ripe was 5. Let's go back to the question. So here, overripe was 10, ripe was 5, and we see that that's incorrect. The 10 is indeed greater than 5, so choice B is incorrect. Now, choice C, we're asked whether ripe blueberries and unripe blueberries were cashed at 55%. So ripe, unripe, cash. So here we look at the cash and ripe versus unripe. So that would be 55 versus 55, which going back to the choice, we see that yes, indeed choice C was the correct statement. Question 30 involves the distance traveled. So that would be table 2. And we're asked to look at the eating of unripe red berries versus the caching of unripe red berries. And we're looking, why? We're looking for the distance. So eating versus caching of unripe red berries. So look at table 2, unripe red berries. First locate that, that's row 2. And now look at the correct column. So eating was 18.9, caching 13.4. So eating 18.9, we'll jot that down quickly, caching 13.4. Okay, so now let's look at the answer choices. And eating 18.4 was further distance. So choice A is actually the correct one. Question 31 is a question where a fact is given and you're asked to use that fact along with the results of an experiment to come up with a new conclusion. Now, the fact that's given is that the more perishable a berry, the more frequently it will be eaten. And then you're asked to sort berries based on how perishable they are. So basically, you want to sort them based on how much likely they were to be eaten. So when you're asked to sort from most perishable, really they're asking for mostly eaten to least eaten. So let's look at the berries. Again, there's a lot of bookkeeping here. So first we were interested in the eating habits of overripe red berries. So now we're looking at overripe red berries. And that would be this third row, and we're looking at the column that's related to eating. So that would be 75. And then the next one is unripe blueberries. So we'll go back, blueberries unripe. That would be this row, and the eaten would be 25. So unripe blueberries, let's jot that down. That's 25. And then lastly, we're interested in ripe yellow berries. So ripe yellow berries. That would be, find the correct row, look at the correct column, 35. 35. So now we want to sort them from the highest percentage to the lowest percentage. So it would be 75 to 35 to 25. So that would have been overripe red berries to ripe yellow berries to unripe blueberries. So let's see which one that corresponds to, and that would be choice J. Question 32 involves calculating a value given a percentage. Now, these types of questions do not show up that often, but there is a chance of them showing up, which is why I included it in the practice test. So here, we're given the total ripe blueberries, that's 2,415, and we're asked about how many of those would be cached. So let's first find the appropriate value that we're finding. We're looking for the percentage of ripe blueberries that were cached. So let's go back to the table together, and ripe blueberries that were cached they were cached with a 55% frequency. And one fact that you would want to know before the test, whenever we're asked about a percent of Of in math typically translates to multiplication. So 55% is 55 over 100. Of translates to multiplication, and that's 2,415. And if you do that math quickly, you won't have a calculator, so please have your multiplication tables memorized. You'll see that the answer choice is choice C. Lastly, for question 33, it's a question that does involve reading the passage, but this time we know what to look for. So let's look at the question answer choices. And choice F is saying that percent of berries that were cached were consistent throughout the study. We already know that the percent of berries were not consistent, and we have tables showing that. Also, choice J is saying that the distance traveled was consistent between the studies, which we know is not correct per table 2. So now let's look at choices G and H. One of them is saying the time of day that the berries were placed were consistent between the experiments, and the other is saying that the order in which the berries were placed. So now let's look at the passage, and quickly, now that we have a better idea of the passage, you can quickly glance through it and look for where the berries were being placed. We know what to look for. So we can skip the first 2 passages, and we see in the third passage, it says that the berries were laid out one at a time at sunrise. So that means the time at which they were placed was consistent between these days. So that would be choice G.